Did you know that Lovecraft predicted the future? Well, kinda. Stay tuned and I promise we'll have some great fun. Welcome, dear Lovecraftians and non-Lovecraftians alike. This is Vasil, the Backwater Librarian, your trusted guide through the obscure pathways of literature. Today we'll be looking at what may be the first ever published poem by Lovecraft, the prophetic Providence in 2000 AD. It first appeared in 1912 in the Providence Evening Journal, when Lovecraft was only 22, and it depicts the grim future of his beloved hometown in the far-off year of 2000? In the description below you'll find a link where you can read the full text, as well as one where you'll find a cutout from the newspaper it was originally published in, for all of you ardent antiquarians out there. And just in case my accent comes across as too thick, you'll find a full English transcript in the settings menu of the video. The literary merit of the poem, or lack thereof, is such that I can't pretend to be making a very serious video here. Instead, it will be rather spontaneous, hopefully funny, and also unapologetically political. We'll be mainly looking at how accurate Lovecraft's predictions for the future were, and poking some fun at today's clown world. Now, full disclosure here. I've never been to the USA, and although I'd like to visit one day, I highly doubt crooked Joe Biden would give me a visa. Then again, I should maybe simply casually stroll in at the southern border. I've heard that's the government-sponsored mode of entry nowadays. What do you think? So, that portion of my commentary relating to the societal and political state in the USA will be based on accounts by American friends of mine, as well as on non-American ones who have visited the USA. And then, of course, those red pill YouTube rabbit holes will supply the rest. So, without any further delay, let's dive directly into this poem. The narrator is an Englishman from the year of 2000, and it doesn't take much imagination in order to guess that Lovecraft was actually envisioning himself. In the opening verses, we learn that his family actually comes from Providence, Rhode Island, but they had to leave for their ancestral England, pushed out, as it seems, by waves of immigration into the United States. So now our narrator, or poet, I may put it better, wants to visit Providence and see for himself what it's actually like there. For years I'd saved my few and hard-earned pence to cross the seas and visit Providence, for though by birth an Englishman I am, my forebears dwelt in undersized Rhode Island, until, pressed hard by foreign immigrations, obliged they were to leave the old plantations and seek a life of quiet and repose on British soil whence our family rose. Wow, did H.P. Lovecraft foresee the phenomenon of white flight or what? There follows a short description of the travel itself. When on my trip I ventured to embark, I stepped aboard a swift and ponderous ark, which swimmed the waves and in a single day attained its port in Narragansett Bay. Here I find it interesting that Lovecraft pictures himself traveling in an advanced cruising ship, as it seems, and not in an airplane. Let's not forget that the poem was written in 1912, when aviation was still in its infancy, and this would explain why Lovecraft doesn't picture himself traveling by airplane. Apart from that, I think I have read or heard somewhere that he was vehemently opposed to aviation and to the idea of flight itself. So maybe that's the reason why he chose to go with a naval vessel instead. Upon arrival, he is instantly shocked at how the hometown of his grandfathers has been culturally enriched by diversity, and how English is actually nowhere to be heard. I left the ship and with astonished eyes surveyed a city filled with foreign cries. No word of discourse could I understand, for English was unknown throughout the land. I went ashore at São Miguel's Cape, where clustered men of every hue and shape. They say this place as Fox Point was once known, but Negro bravas have that name overthrown. This then sets the tone for the rest of the poem. The bulk of it consists of our narrator traveling around town and being shocked at how the original English-speaking American inhabitants are nowhere to be seen, and how they have been completely supplanted by different immigrant groups who all speak their own languages. This demographic change is reflected in the altered toponyms, most often street names, the original English ones being substituted with new non-English ones in the language of the ethnic group which now inhabits the given area. The Negro bravas mentioned here, by the way, are none other but the inhabitants of the Cape Verde Islands of the Western African coast, who are, as I believe, Lusophones. Next up in the pecking order are, wait for it, the Irish.
What?
He tells us how Erin's sons, i.e. the Irish, have renamed South Main into O'Murphy's Avenue. You know, it might seem funny, but those pesky Irishmen can be quite dangerous, you know.
I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the f*** he wants.
Next up, he lashes out at the Jews, who have apparently taken over what was once Market Square and turned it into Goldstein's Court, among other mischiefs.
If I were a rich man.
Let's jump to a part of the poem I find quite interesting. My course now lay along a narrow street, up which I tramped with sore and weary feet. Its name is Svensson's Lane, for by the Swede Westminster Street was altered thus to read. I find it very intriguing that not even the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swedes are let off the hook. This goes on to show you that Lovecraft was not some wide-eyed racist kook in the vein of Madison Grant or Lothrop Stoddart, postulating some made-up concept about a supposedly great Nordic race. Instead, he was more of a conservative, more of a general xenophobe, who wanted for his hometown to remain as it had been, to keep its local identity. So this poem is in no way a white versus black issue or something of the sort, but rather a portrayal, no matter how funny, of his emotional anxieties about the immigration trends of his time. Then he goes on to rave against the Italians, because, hey, why not?
What if I was just to kick the ever-loving shit out of you?
Against the Francophone Canadians.
Bonjour tout le monde, merci d'être des nôtres.
And finishes up his rant by hammering his favorite East Europeans, the poles. Having had enough of cultural enrichment and diversity, our narrator is eager to quit the place as soon as possible and go back to where he came from. At the dock, however, he chances upon a strange creature. With terror struck, I sought the wharf once more, but as my steamboat's whistle 'gan to roar, a shriveled form, half crouching twixt the freight, seized on my arm and halted short my gait. "Who art thou, Sarah?" I in wonder cried. "A monstrous prodigy," the fellow sighed, "last of my kind, a lone, unhappy man. My name is Smith. I'm an American." Wow, what a quality ending, right? Could he have chosen a more generic name? What do you think? But interestingly enough, this character somehow does remind me of the poor drunkard Zadok Allen from The Shadow over Innsmouth. A lone, normal person among tainted half-breeds, so as to say, a remnant from a bygone, better, more normal age. So, did Lovecraft accurately predict the future? Well, he didn't get the details right. Providence, and by extension the USA, fortunately didn't turn into the Tower of Babel he had prophesied, and most, if not all, of the ethnic groups mentioned here have adopted English as their native language and have more or less assimilated into a common American culture. But as for the broader picture, I'd say he was correct that mass immigration would in the end be to the detriment of the USA. I think we're witnessing the limits of the American melting pot, as instead of a single, more or less overarching and harmonious American culture, we now have several competing and opposing ones. The shrinking, mostly divided whites, the victimhood mentality African Americans. I know they didn't immigrate out of their own free will, but that's a topic for another day. Then the proud Latinos, as well as several smaller but powerful ethnocultural blocs: Jewish Americans, Asian Americans, Arab Americans. The tensions between these different cultures have then been further strained and exacerbated by such misguided trends as identity politics, which were championed in their latest modern iteration by none other than soy boy Barack Soybama. These tensions can then easily boil over into open hostility and even deadly violence. I remember a female American acquaintance of mine explaining to me once how there's this very superficial tolerance, but how the tension and animosity always simmer below the surface, ready to violently explode at the slightest trigger. So yes, in principle, Lovecraft was right. Mass immigration and increased levels of both ethnic and cultural diversity do make a society weaker, not stronger. Examples are everywhere, both ancient and modern. The late barbarian overrun Roman Empire or the zero-trust society Western Europe of today, for that matter. I'll still end on a positive note though. Even if we're clearly living in decadent times, and although the American Empire and the European continent are past their zenith, I'm still convinced that their people, similarly to the Romans of the late Empire, are still capable of great cultural and societal achievements. And who knows, if we get our act together, we might just turn things around and still get a chance at a brighter future. For more commentary on Lovecraft, classic weird fiction and lesser known but awesome literature in general, feel free to like and subscribe. And remember, the Backwater Librarian guides you through the obscure pathways of literature. Thank you for watching and pleasant reading.